You are watching the Capital PTBO Sports Show, an MNC podcast production. You can check us out on Twitter at MNC Podcasts. On today's show, the Petes complete their regular season schedule. The World Baseball Classic provides a memorable ending, and we will debate whether or not upsets are actually good for March Madness. Welcoming into the conversation, as always, we've got my main man, Mark Million.
Yes, sir.
Owner of the Capital PTBO. Come and check us out anytime at 370 George Street North. Also, up in the penalty box, Matt Latour. You know how many comments I get that people think he's in a different room and or above us somehow?
Well,
he's in the box.
I don't have the brick background, so people like immediately think it's just like, because every time you go and you're in like a timekeeper's box at a hockey arena, it's like it's all just like plain drywall, right?
Yeah.
So
I could see that.
Jesse Young said it last week that he gets a kick out of me up in the box.
Yeah.
Yes, he did. And my daughter Izzy always says, "What's Uncle Matty doing up in the box?" And I said, "Well, you know, he's serving a penalty."
5-minute major.
Terrific.
Gentlemen, this show would not be possible without the support of Brian Goldfinger of Goldfinger Personal Injury Law. If you want a free consultation and need the best in the business, visit goldfingerlaw.com or call 1-877-730-1777. Again, goldfingerlaw.com. Also, a shout out to all of our subscribers on Patreon. You can visit patreon.com/capitalptbo, become a supporter of the show, and your name can be on the Wheel of Win Nothing. And we're going to get ready to spin that wheel again for another episode.
What have we got this week, Matthew? We've got 9 names.
9 names.
All loaded. Roger Self, defending champion.
Roger Self, defending champion. Couple that haven't won. Nikki Kimball, I don't think, has won.
Nikki Kimball, let's get this kid a win.
Craig Meredith, I don't think, has won.
Craig Meredith is the latest and greatest to get to the list. He was in today asking me, "Mark, can you get me a win?" I said, "Listen, Craig, it's not that kind of show. We've got standards here, man."
Does Mark Sr. have a win?
Mark Sr. got off the schneid 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
So, and we've got a couple of the OGs. Jimmy's got a bag full of wins. Dara's got a bag full. Maurice Cormier, bag full. Brad Sinclair's been a little bit dry.
Yeah.
He has. He's been, he's on the rehab stint here. Maybe we can get him one here. He's rehabbing.
All right, let's spin it.
Let's get him one. And the winner is...
Say it ain't so. Nikki Kimball.
Wow.
There we go.
That doesn't appear sketchy at all. We talked about it.
We've learned that we can't rig the wheel. Like we've talked about this before.
That's the kind of standards that we want to set, though.
We do have a new supporter of the Wheel of Win Nothing because it is so popular amongst our audience. There was somebody who wanted to throw their support behind it. What can you tell us about the candy that is hanging from your microphone today?
We got a nice close-up shot of it, too.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Flash Freeze Candy Company is new. It's the latest and greatest. If you haven't tried freeze-dried candy, I'm not a candy guy. Trust me. The flavor country on these things, terrific. So imagine, so they use Skittles or Starburst and these sorts of things. They can't use the commercial names, but that's what the products are. So I think Skittles, Flash Freeze calls Skidaddles. But so I'm not a big Skittles guy, but you take the first one in and they're like chewy and whatever, and the flavor's decent. You put it in the Flash Freeze. You take one out, it crumbles instantly. The flavor is magnified 10 times. It's terrific. You'll try one and then you'll mash the bag. I know it. So special thanks to Flash Freeze Candy Company for supporting the big wheel of Win Nothing.
Flash Freeze Candy Company. Go and check them out.
I think we need to do an on-air taste test one of these weeks.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe not this week, but yeah.
I'll talk to the owners. We'll bring one next week.
Yeah, that sounds good. We know that the Ontario Hockey League regular season winding down. The Peterborough Petes, sort of in the middle of the pack in the Eastern Conference. I guess this is just time for a temperature check and or excitement level amongst you guys. I want to share a little bit of an anecdote here. Our friends at Your TV, Pete Dalladay, Scott Arnold, I think Dan Malta was involved, and they were shooting a video. I don't know if I'm supposed to say this. They were shooting a video as part of a promo package for the upcoming push for the playoffs. And they were doing some things out in the street in the community, and Roger was there and all this kind of stuff. And the one thing that Scott told me was the amount of honks, of support, the amount of people yelling, "Go Petes, go." It was just very organic, and it was very cool, and it sort of triggered us both that there is this really big appetite for a long playoff run for the Peterborough Petes. And let's not mince words. I think most people would say with this team, with this roster, a lot of the moves, they've been frustrated with the inconsistency. And I'm sure if you actually polled Mike Oak and Rob Wilson, the results haven't come the way that they thought. However, the one thing the coach has been saying that has been very consistent is all we need to do is get into the playoffs. We feel we could beat every team in the Eastern Conference, and then we'll see where the chips lie. So there is confidence in that building. There's confidence in the roster. And it looks like the fan base just really energized. And we'll give them a shout out later. But the U16 AAA Petes just won an OMHA championship.
Yeah.
First time at that age group in about 15 years. And I guess they were either part of this package or whatever and wearing the red hats. And the amount of honks and stuff that they got, it just felt like everyone was in the mood for a little spring hockey, and we don't want it to end soon.
Absolutely, and I think we've been a little bit short in terms of the spring hockey that we've watched at the Memorial Center over the years. So I think if you took a straw poll even of the boys in the room, just a privacy, it didn't let anybody know anything about it. I think the boys know. They understand, have the same philosophy, I'm sure, as Rob is like, we've just got to get there. There's going to be no, like, I know that it's, look, you lose to Sudbury, I get it. You lose to North Bay, I get it. But if the boys come out this weekend and they punch out a win Thursday night here in the, to close the regular season at home, they got a home and home with Ottawa and then Plymouth? Mississauga.
Plymouth, wow.
Jeepers. I was going to say, yeah.
A little flashback.
Mississauga. What would the fan base, what would the temperature of the room be if, they beat Ottawa back-to-back and, overtime lost to Mississauga?
Going to be a lot of fun to watch, and a lot of people paying attention to what exactly the first-round matchup is going to be. No matter who they face, no matter what way it shakes out in the first round, I definitely like their chances. After that, I mean, the one thing that I always think, and we'll see against Ottawa, a team they've played very competitively this year, but it's been difficult to get wins against North Bay, and it's been difficult to get wins against Barrie. Yeah. And I know up until this point, you could say, wow, the games haven't mattered or the stakes haven't been the same. But, I mean, they played a pretty good game recently in North Bay, and North Bay just has the ability to find a way, and it seems like it's been like that the last couple of years.
I think it'll boil right down to, I don't think Barrie or North Bay are licking their chops to get the Peterborough Petes opening round. I don't think anybody is.
No.
So, let's go, boys. Now's the time. It's time for, let's play some hockey in April. It'll be beautiful.
A few thoughts. Is this the most threatening fourth place team we've ever seen? Like, this is a stacked team to be in fourth place.
Mm-hmm. On paper, absolutely.
And then the other one, you mentioned the under 16 Petes.
Yeah.
Like, we got to talk about that game. That's a triple overtime 1-0 win.
Triple overtime 1-0. Pretty remarkable. Good video shared on Twitter by OMHA, which was kind of cool. And again, just the fact that it had been so long for that particular age group to pick up a victory at that level. Outstanding stuff. So we want to give them all a shout out because that certainly was the talk of the sporting community.
Goaltender Mason Johnson with 8 straight shutout periods leading it, or like including that game.
Pretty impressive stuff. Just to show you how all in on the OHL we are currently, coming up in our Mono challenge a bit later on in the program, we are going to delve into Peterborough Petes 100-point scorers. Oh, no. Matt, you get rid of that Google machine over there. I shouldn't have let it slip that early, should I have? He's going to just do a bunch of research.
Well, he'll get, if it was Facebook Live, he'll get Shane Sayer back. Shane will...
Listen. Shane Sayer doesn't know anything about Norway. That was all me.
Yeah, I know. That was all Wikipedia.
That's all me.
Mono challenge is going to be 100-point getters for the Petes?
Yes.
Yikes. Oh, my gosh.
I think there's been about 20 or 21.
Okay, good.
So it's a big list, but not like super big list.
Like we've had lopsided trivia before with baseball. But a guy that's grown up in Peterborough versus a guy that's been here 5 years, that seems a little lopsided.
I'm just saying. I did want to continue this conversation around junior hockey. The QMJHL is going to tighten rules around fighting. They've heard few objections to this. Mm-hmm. So this is an article that came out, I think, late last week. But basically, it's, I hate to say it, but project 10 years down the line, and I don't think this is going to be, I think this is the first domino to kind of go.
Yeah.
I don't know at the pro level, because I think like Gary Bettman, as long as he's in charge, his vision for the league has sort of included fighting. Who knows what the next one's going to have, but what was your gut on this? Most hockey types, as expected, hockey types hate it. Players, generally speaking, hate it. Hockey observers in media love it. Some of the brass in government love it.
Absolutely. Easy to get behind.
So it is a total divide. And most of my friends who hate it said, at what lengths are you going to satisfy people who very rarely even watch the sport and or do so at a casual level? Fair. What was your reaction when you saw that this was going to be the case? I
don't particularly like it. I feel like it is the beginning of the end of fighting. And I don't tune in for the fighting. I tune in for the game itself. What I didn't like, I don't like the finality of it, and I don't like how there's no other causation to go with it. So I think if you went back into like the Gil Stein era where they started to, they have the instigator and these sorts of things, you saw guys, more high sticks, there was more violence, there's more elbows, there's more of those sorts of things because the code, quote unquote, that that the people had, that the players had played with. If you watch the evolution of fighting's always been part of hockey, and then Ed Snyder and the Flyers decide, look, we're not going to get smashed around anymore.
Yeah,
St. Louis Blues let us have it. They went to the Stanley Cup Final 3 straight years. So we're not going to take that anymore, like Twisted Sister. So they start bringing these guys along. Clark is tough, and Dornhofer and Kinderchuk and Mad Dog Kelly and guys that would Dave Schultz that rip your arms off, and then it stopped. Right, like then it curbed. Each team had one guy. Okay, well, fine. Would you rather have more violence? Would you have the guys get angry on the ice? Would you rather have more spears, more high sticks, more slashes? I don't think so. In my opinion, I'm not sure that hockey fighting really hurts the brand. I think it does if you're talking about the 1970s Flyers level of it.
Yeah.
But otherwise, hockey fights, in my opinion, only hurt the players, the two that are engaged.
So I should point out that the OHL and the WHL have said at this point they are not looking at changing any of the rules. The National Hockey League as well. However, brass with the Q think that this could be the first domino to fall.
Yeah.
Now, I am not a Neanderthal who needs a lot of fights. I just don't. But I think, first of all, fighting has always been part of the culture of the game. Mm-hmm. That's just the way that it is. You can't deny it. It's existed. I think it does serve a disciplinary purpose within the confines of the game because one or two referees, they're not going to see all the cheap stuff that happens, and you could argue, well, the league needs to do better surveillance. Okay, fine. But that doesn't repair the guy whose hand got broke because of a slash.
Sure.
So I think there is that element, although I think, incidents are few and far between nowadays because my biggest fear is I think hockey, in my opinion, is beautiful because there's this melting pot of all of these different types of skills and emotions. So the brass in Quebec right now in the government is saying, look, hockey's about skill and finesse, and fighting doesn't need to be at the center of it anymore. Fair.
Right.
I like skill and finesse, but I like physical contact. I like body checking. I mean, unless it's two teams, I recently watching a Toronto-Boston game. That was great, the intensity. But you flip on most of these games on a Wednesday night. I mean, you can count body checks on one hand. It's already a part that's sort of drifting, and I think that makes the sport less enjoyable. I never liked stage fighting. I didn't like fighting just because you had to.
Yeah.
But at the same time, was there a time that I watched hockey any more than a period where the Red Wings had Probert and Koser and eventually McCarty? And I think if you talk to most Leaf fans, I mean, up until he left, was Ty Domi not like the most popular guy in the crowd?
Wendell
Clark, for sure. And listen, it happened the other day, and Paul Bissonnette, he was on the Spit and Chicklets podcast. By the way, you can check out merch here in the store.
Correct.
370 George Street North for Spit and Chicklets.
No big deal.
His point was a similar point that Don Cherry used to echo once upon a time, which was when Marc-Andre Fleury was getting ready to drop the gloves with Jordan Binnington, and they wouldn't let them fight. I didn't see a lot of people running for the exit saying, we're disgusted, we're leaving. The paying audience, and there's a still picture of everybody on their feet. It then became a focal point of conversation in sports media and that sort of promotion. So his opinion is it is something to do for the sport to definitely still stand out. I think there's a healthy level. I like that it's not over the top anymore. I like that the enforcer types who literally can only fight, I mean, they've seemingly been weeded out.
Yeah.
But I still believe it has a role. I still believe it's something that makes hockey unique. And I think you mix the physicality in with the finesse and the speed, and that's when you have hockey at its absolute best. And I don't want to hear this from people either. I'm on a soapbox now. Well, there's no fighting in the, hockey's at its best in the playoffs and there's no fighting. That's just a lie. There's fights all the time in the playoffs. Is there not? At the end of games and scrums, and there is that passionate level. You don't see the bogus stage fighting in the playoffs, maybe. But every year I have the same friends saying the same thing to me about, well, there's no fighting in the playoffs. And every year I send him videos of, oh, wait, what about this fight?
Right.
And what about that fight? And that's just the part that that I think is a bit of a misnomer.
Would you rather have the stage fighting?
No.
I liked it. I liked it.
The stage fighting?
I liked knowing that there's two big heavyweights in the game and they were going to go at it at some point, whether the game dictated it or not. The only kind of fighting I'm not a fan of is after a big clean hit. And the guy has to fight. And that's like when we talk about fighting in hockey, I feel like that's 90% of fights these days is after a clean hit.
That's the only time they fight now.
Yeah.
Before it used to be you took a liberty with
a dirty hit or an elbow.
Sure, a dirty hit, an elbow on. I mean, whether it was one of your core guys or not, these clean hits today, holy smokes! The guys, it's so ridiculous. The other way now, a fight happens as a result of a hit, but it won't in the postseason. And the postseason is the time where I watch hockey religiously in the playoffs because, I mean, aside from keeping up with the Leafs, and I enjoy watching the late game. Like, I still find that fun from when I was a kid. I used to love staying up and watching Calgary, Edmonton, Vancouver, whatever. But otherwise, I mean, the hockey is so vanilla in the middle of February.
Yeah.
Holy smokes.
Like, I realized, like, the fighting after a clean hit thing, it's been around for a while. Because it used to happen to Nick Cronwall all the time on the road.
Oh, it totally did. And I think if I'm going to be consistent with my point, yeah, I mean, regardless if the hitter is clean or not, if Marty McSorley took an abnormal run at Doug Gilmour, he was probably going to have to pay for it, right?
Absolutely.
Wendell Clark or Ken Baumgartner or whatever, one of these guys was going to come and say it. It's frustrating, but at the same time, on that team, you need to say, like, oh, there's some guys you can hit and there's some guys you can't hit, and that's kind of a guy you can't hit, so now we're going to fight.
Yeah.
But anyways, I thought that was interesting, and again, it's, for me, again, it is basically, and a little bit of a generalization, but more and more, we talk to people all the time. Hardcore hockey fans are like, leave it in, let's go. The people who pay their money and go see the games, and they're pumped. The bureaucrats are kind of on the other side being like, this is goofy. We've got 16-year-olds fighting 20-year-olds, and, that's assault basically anywhere else, and how do we do this? And it's a stain on the league. I think they've put in appropriate rules. I think they limit fighting. One of the GMs in the queue said, the rules are so strict now, I don't see a lot of the gameplay changing.
Yeah.
And if somebody's going to fight and take a 2-game suspension, they're still going to do that.
They were still going to do that anyways.
So, I don't know. And the one critique from the players' point of view is, how do they get ready and develop to the National Hockey League when at the next level you could potentially fight if you're not exposed to that when you're in junior hockey?
I guess in a generational sort of way, though, that would you be in the Quebec Major Junior League if this is a rule that continued, say, for a decade? I would think that the Quebec Major Junior kid is at a disadvantage when in the Western League, where maybe the boys are a little bit more cowboy, a little bit more liberal.
Well, ask you who's filling out the bottom 6 spots on an NHL roster. It's people with sandpaper, people who have physicality, people who can fight.
Mm-hmm.
And now you're not going to have those players being drafted from the queue. So I think if they bring this in and then within 5 to 10 years they look and say, oh my God, the players drafted in the WHL and the OHL compared to the Q, that'll be an interesting assessment to see if it does make that difference in terms of development.
I wonder, just for devil's advocate's sake,
Yep.
it's never been a big part of the European game.
Correct.
So, and I mean, it's not necessarily that the Europeans have, in the initial wave, when the Russians started coming in the late 80s, like with, and the Europeans with consistency at the NHL draft, in the beginning, it was skill-based, right? You weren't bringing a third line, fourth line plugger from Finland. That wasn't happening. Now, in today's game, you know, you get a lot of those roles. The Europeans, the Russians, the international game has changed in such a way where now there's defined roles. Not everybody is a 40, 50 goal scorer. And it seemed to have had no effect.
Right.
They've, if anything, now in this generation, they've adapted to the North American model because it is much different, and you see it every international tournament. You know, Canada and the States are heavily penalized every World Junior tournament. I don't know. It's interesting. I don't like it on its core. I don't like it. I don't know what kind of change it'll bring.
I'm going to reinstate my opinion, which is that hockey's the best when it has a mix of a lot of things: emotion, speed, skill, finesse. I mean, what made those, Detroit, Colorado games great? There was the fighting element, but then you also had the best forwards in the world and great defensemen, and it was just this perfect mix of a little bit of goofiness, a little bit of over the line. You're playing so close because the margin of talent is so razor thin between the two squads. And that's just one example. I mean, you can go back and look at rivalries all over the place. Montreal and Boston could be very similar. So,
right.
Speaking of junior hockey, have you heard of Connor Bedard?
I have heard a thing or two.
Hey, he's doing all right. He's doing all right. Would the real Connor please stand up?
Do we need the stat line?
If you could get it for me, that would be great. I want to know from a fan standpoint and then from a league standpoint, what's the best case scenario for where he lands?
Wow.
Matt, you're a Montreal fan.
The stat line before I begin my campaign.
Yeah.
55 games played, 70 goals, 72 assists for 142 points.
Wow.
He's got 2 games left.
As we record
Wednesday afternoon.
Columbus has a 25.5% chance.
Right.
San Jose, 13.5. Chicago, 11.5. Anaheim, 9.5. Montreal, 8.5. Philadelphia, 7.5. I won't go back any further, but Arizona, Vancouver, Detroit, they're sort of all in the mix.
So all I could hear, and I'm going to give conspiracy theory here.
Yep.
The draft is rigged. Like, come on.
Oh,
this is the Patrick Ewing frozen
on.
envelope.
Yeah, the frozen envelope.
Listen,
okay, I'm
he's
listening.
not going to Columbus. They're not going to give Columbus the first overall pick. Anaheim haven't won anything in 20 years.
Oh, but he's a West Coast kid.
It doesn't matter. We have enough stars in the West. We need them over here.
He's got Zegras.
We need the stars in the Eastern Conference.
Okay.
McDavid being in the West has killed it. Who else was on there? Chicago. After what happened in Chicago, they're not getting the first overall pick.
No.
San Jose, they've never won anything. Like, it's time. The Montreal Canadiens need the first overall pick again.
Yeah, do they?
They're going to do what Edmonton did in the mid-2010s, but they're going to do it right.
Yeah. Okay, back to reality. The Columbus Blue Jackets, this is Gary Bettman's model, right? This is, forget it, we're going to make hockey in Ohio a thing. We're going to, we're going to stick with Columbus. Lord knows he's stuck with Phoenix through everything, through a 3,500 seat arena, through Jim Ball Silly, PCVS grad. So I don't see this as being anything but he's going to go to Columbus. It's an entry-level deal. The kid's going to LeBron anyway, right? He's going to get his 3-year entry deal. He's going to get paid whatever the cap is.
Like, NHL first overall picks don't do that, though.
No, I understand that, but he's gonna be like Connor would have had McDavid would have had the same opportunity. Edmonton just never let it happen. They just, here's the blank check. Whatever the NHLPA will allow, we'd appreciate if you'd write that down. Okay, fine, $12 million.
But he could have done that in like open free agency too, no?
Probably, but I think if you look back, I think they signed him in the 3rd year before they allowed free agency to go. And
yeah, but he still had the choice. Like guys just don't dip out after their entry level contract.
Correct.
Going first overall
because it's only a 3-year deal. And McDavid, to his point, had never he didn't hit the apex yet of his career. Bedard would go to a place like Columbus. They've got 3 or 4 beat reporters. He's not walking down the street getting mobbed. It actually would be a decent. If he goes to Montreal, goes on an 8-game slide or something, the people there will riot. They will kill him.
Well, then he better play better. He's the first overall pick.
I understand that, but you're putting it on the show. Slafkovsky was an overall pick. They were asking open questions in La Presse with preseason Slafkovsky. He hadn't scored in like 6 games, and they're, oh my God.
Imagine like LeBron went to Utah. Like nobody, like put him in a market where he's going to get attention, not Columbus.
What do you think, Mercier?
So, you guys are both close. But let me say this. I think the best case scenario for the NHL is to have him on the East Coast. Matt, you're right about that. Sending him out to San Jose, sending him out to Anaheim, I mean, there's ceilings there, and again, you're not getting the same observation. You're not getting the same ink.
I like that we all kind of agree this is just the decision the league has to make.
Yes.
Not a lottery.
Chicago is interesting. You pointed, stained resume. We've seen them win 3 different Stanley Cups. Is this a way forward for them that they can ditch that bygone era? I'm not necessarily sure they need to. They can struggle for a little bit. What about going to the Philadelphia Flyers?
I've thought of this before with the Flyers. Woo! Danny Briere, aside from getting his kid's house in order, like, holy smokes.
Throwing a wheelchair down the stairs?
Come on.
Got charged, by the way.
Got charged.
Yep.
There seems to be a movement afoot with Danny Briere to, like, bring the Flyers into the 21st century. And I mean that with all due respect. And I think it's getting away from the Broad Street Bullies were the Flyers. Because it's still that mentality, even though the Broad Street Bullies were put to bed 50 years ago, 40 years ago.
There's a rough and tumble nature to the team.
There's a rough and tumble nature to the crowd, to the city.
There's an identity there. And it's similar. I always look at the NFL with like the Chicago Bears. No matter how long they've been around, they just never get a quarterback. It's like, we want to run the ball and play defense.
Right.
Yeah.
Philadelphia, to their credit, there's always been a culture with that team. And their stars have been really good, but also physical, imposing, like that sort of thing.
Well, you think about their Cup final run in 2010.
Yeah.
Like Claude Giroux, Scott Hartnell,
Right.
Billy Lano.
These are guys
Daniel
that are
Carcillo, like
Billy Lano.
just dudes that can they can punch.
And they can back it up. They'll get in front of the mic and they would let you know as much as that, like the Boston Bruins do, right? Bergeron says the right things and Marchand says the things that he wants people to hear. You know, he wants people to know that nobody likes him. I don't think that's a recipe for success for a guy like Bedard.
I think the league would be super excited for him to get to Philadelphia.
Wow, really?
Major city, East Coast, team that hasn't won a cup since 75. There's a lot of storylines there. And yet, even though there hasn't been a cup, very successful, been to a lot of finals.
Yeah.
And I mean, and you drop him into a division with Ovechkin and Crosby immediately.
Exactly. The natural rivalries
the Rangers
there.
are a powerhouse.
Okay, but is there not more to, if the kid gets drafted by the Vancouver Canucks, he's a hometown Vancouver kid, now you've got Connor versus Connor in the same division, you're going to get it 4 to 6 times a year if the NHL ever figures it out. But
at 10 p.m. Like,
I understand, but
no one's going to watch.
I think people watch now. People watch with McDavid now. Do you have a problem with 75% of your fan base being on the Eastern Seaboard? Yeah.
People watch with McDavid now in Canada. The average U.S. fan doesn't watch Connor McDavid.
This is it. This is why I go with Philadelphia, not Montreal, is because I believe they need that next star to take the mantle from Crosby and Ovechkin and go forward. There's some good players. You mentioned Zegras. We know that there's good players around Gaudreau and McKinnon and all this kind of stuff, but that transcendent guy who could be on the picture of the magazine, and this is the next one. This is the phenom. I think, again, I'm speaking solely from the National Hockey League. I think that's the best case scenario. I should point, again, as we record, it's only a 7.5% chance, but you're saying there's a chance.
Yeah.
I still think they have. Like, you put the number 1 pick in the biggest hockey market other than Toronto in the league.
Again, there's a Canada part of that too, where they know they're going to be successful in Montreal anyways. And yeah, it would be electric and it would be fun. It would be similar to the Leafs getting Matthews and it would be great. But I think from the United States, if I'm Gary and I'm looking at it and I'm like, okay. but not Columbus. Like, no disrespect, although you make a good point that he might be excited in that having that team and turning it into a power wheel. I'm a little more traditional in Philadelphia. Not original six, but like original other six, right? So they've been around. They've got pedigree.
Yeah. Who's the captain in Columbus? Boone Jenner? Can you guys tell me this off the top of your head as two guys that watch hockey regularly?
Adam Foote.
Yeah,
Luke Richardson.
I couldn't tell you for sure, though I would think that it is Boone Jenner. I would love to explore this at another time. This is a Mark Millian Sr. original that I've added a little spin to, where the belief would be is that the number one draft pick is an open market, not a draft. So it's an open bid process. So Connor Bedard comes up. He's the number one guy. Okay. It's $5 million. It's a $5 million. So $5 million, you have a cap hit of $5 million. The Toronto Maple Leafs will pay the most. We'll pay $6 million. No problem. Now you've got to exercise William Nylander somewhere down the road. You've got to take him, put him on the books instead of the crap teams shouldn't be rewarded with a Connor Bedard. Because it doesn't work unless Edmonton, you got 6 stabs at it or 5 firsts at it, and you finally got McJesus, and Crosby in Pittsburgh.
Even then, you're not making the playoffs.
And even then, the kid's still in 7th place. Anyways, let's table that for another one.
Okay. I want to talk clothing, and you're the right man to do it with. The National Hockey League announced this week that it is going to be changing partners for apparel, jersey manufacturing. Currently Adidas, now Fanatics. This was met with a wave of negative publicity, which it seems like most things are in the NHL. A lot of people are still very critical of the ad boards and sort of that process. Sidney Crosby says the playoff format should go back. Then Gary comes out and says, no, it's fine. Like, there's a lot of people that are like, hey, what's Gary listening to?
Yeah.
Fanatics. Okay, first of all, tell us a little bit about Fanatics and what was your reaction to that?
So Fanatics they are the number one licensed product provider in the world, like north of $6 billion a year in sales. They do every game that you watch, NFL, NBA, MLB, NHL, NCAA. You watch the bowl games. When the winner gets announced, there's a Fanatics commercial with "Get Your Gear." So these guys do it the best. The belief from guys that I've talked to about it, people that are jersey guys or collectors, there's a couple of things. One, it's believed that Fanatics is more for the fan. It's more, and it's been built this way as the number one destination for fans. There's a difference between setting that bar and going, as an example, the NBA takes Adidas or they take Nike. They would never take Mitchell & Ness. And it's not because Mitchell & Ness's product is subservient. It's not. It's terrific. The quality is spectacular. The fashion side of it is Mitchell & Ness. Guys will wear Mitchell & Ness as opposed to Adidas. The fan will wear Adidas. The fashion guy will wear Mitchell & Ness. On the Fanatics side of it, the jersey guy doesn't want Fanatics. They want Adidas or CCM. They want to go back. They want to go back to Reebok. The belief is that the Fanatics one, from the collector, from the serious point of view guy, is the product won't be the same or actually inferior. So, I mean, for the regular consumer that just wants to get a Toronto Maple Leaf gamer, I mean, we have it here all the time, to be honest. We have people that they want a Leafs jersey, want a men's Leafs jersey, and they don't want to spend $200, so they want to spend $100 and get the screen printed, sublimated Walmart special. Great. It's not for those people. The Fanatics guy is that consumer. Now they want to go plus one, and I think that's the reason for kind of for the downgrade early on. It wasn't met with cheers.
I worked with a gentleman who what you'd classify as a jersey guy. Mm-hmm. So I bought some knockoff ones that came from overseas.
Yeah.
And he took one look at it and said, that's a knockoff.
Yeah.
And to me, I'm like, I don't get it. Like, I know it's a knockoff, but at the same time, I'm like, what's the giveaway? And then he would start to point to little things with the stitching and the lettering.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, it says CCM and then it's half cut off and says Reebok on the back.
Sure.
So just little things like that.
Usually in Chinese knockoffs, I'm learning too, but usually the quality of the lettering usually is the dead giveaway. It's a much thinner product.
I got a knockoff Carey Price Olympic jersey, and the double IHF logo said NHL at the bottom.
Yeah.
I
was like, oh, I wonder what gave this
things like that, but on the surface, you wouldn't have a clue. Like if you're walking around the Bell Center, nobody knows.
And for the average fan, you wouldn't care either.
No, yeah, that's true.
So NFL, NBA, and MLB, I think, are all with Nike, right?
Well, MLB at the fan perspective is Nike and Majestic.
But what do the players wear?
The players wear Nike.
So every other of the big four leagues wears Nike for their players. Why not the NHL?
And so I think you can see that too. Nike had their experiment, right? They jumped in the mid 90s. They bought Bauer. They bought market share, went right to the top right away. Tried the flash and the flare. And we were talking about this before the show. The one thing that the NHL does lack, or where it does lack, is it's never made a fashion-forward imprint.
No.
Ever. Anything that's cool comes from the inner city. It does. When the inner city kid wears it, that's where they're taking their mark from. That's where Nike's taking their mark from. That's the kids that wear it there are eventually it makes it to suburbia. That's when it's cool. The NHL's never had that. NBA has it in droves. The NFL has it in droves. MLB in hats has it. Jerseys, not so much. City Series stuff was fire. The NHL's just never had that translation.
Why has nobody been able to design a hockey jersey that you can actually wear out in social settings? So you see this with the NFL. You see this with the NBA. Baseball, a little bit more rare, but even still a button-up that sort of breathes a little bit. Just by design of the hockey jersey, it's always too big. It's always too baggy. It'll be too hot if you're in a cramped space.
It's the only one that has sleeves.
It's the only one that
Long
has.
sleeves.
That's a good point.
Now, there's like hoodies that were on sale. I had a Habs one. Like, it was great.
These are winners.
These are winners. And
100%.
The jerseys were big for a bit, I remember. I had a Yager jersey. I had a Carey Price. I had a Dustin Byfuglien. I loved jerseys.
Wow. That for the fan is good. That is multifaceted. That hoodie that has the potential, has the drawstrings on the front, looks like an NHL or has the same sort of patterning as an NHL jersey, is a winner on the fashion side. It is.
The jerseys there, yeah.
The name and number tees, also good to a particular demographic, but not the same.
We'll see how it ends up playing out, but that was big retail news that broke a little bit earlier. Let's get into some miscellaneous topics. The World Baseball Classic, we haven't spent a lot of time talking about it.
Oh, boy.
However, as it seems was choreographed by Vince McMahon, it comes down to 3-2, Ohtani versus Trout, teammate versus teammate, captain versus captain, flag bearer versus flag bearer, Japan versus the United States. Let's listen to it from the Japanese perspective. In what is going to be the most watched baseball game in the history of the world, the Japanese win the World Baseball Classic once again with a thrilling 3-2 victory over the Americans. That was Shohei Ohtani striking out Mike Trout.
Storybook ending.
Storybook ending in every which way. You could hear the excitement in the broadcasters. I mean, we know Chris Cuthbert was very excited for the golden goal call. I mean, this is their equivalent, right? This is their sport. This is their entire, 50% of their nation watching this particular game.
Yeah.
It's against the United States. So that raises the stakes versus if it was against Cuba, no disrespect, but it just ratchets it up the interest that much more. I didn't watch a lot of it. I was disappointed in Canada. Again, couldn't really get out their stars, so you weren't seeing the best of the best.
Yeah.
I know there were some injury talks along the way. Edwin Diaz.
Yeah.
Jose Altuve.
Yeah.
That sucks. That
Keith
being said,
Olbermann.
Well,
Keith Olbermann also injured himself. Like, get off Twitter.
Keith is a sad individual.
Honestly.
I just like that it came down to like arguably the two best players in the world.
Yes.
So I was looking for the numbers and I can't find them, and maybe it's like as of right now they won't show it. The Game 6 1980 World Series, Philadelphia, Kansas City is by and large the most watched.
54.4 million.
Right.
Yeah, average.
Japan versus Korea in the round the round robin
Was like 70.
Right, 70 million. So either the WBC, so I don't look at the attendance numbers as being a thing because people are starved for baseball. We haven't had it since November. You're in markets that almost never experience playoff baseball, like Miami. So you're going to get purists that are going to be, I want to watch the best on best. When 97.4% of the TVs in Japan tune in, 97.4% of TVs in any country, the thing means something. I know early on, I know our takes where this thing doesn't mean anything.
Yep.
We're either in the minority,
Mm-hmm.
but now what it's shown is they're going to renew it for 2026 or whatever it is,
Yes.
the next one.
Yep.
If you bring this in the mid-season, is it more effective? Is it possible that they could hit a bigger home run than what they... Obviously, getting Ohtani for Trout, okay, they bring Ohtani in for the ninth. It's not like Ohtani started the game.
No.
Right? So they bring him in for the ninth. If he doesn't walk McNeil, you don't get to Mike.
So I'm reading online. It's projecting that the final viewership in Japan is 25 times higher than in the U.S., and the U.S. is 4.4 million.
100 million.
110, yeah.
Ridiculous.
Which is a Super Bowl.
Which is a Super Bowl. So TV executives, Rob Manfred must be grinding his little wee grubby hands together like, oh, we've got a winner here. But I wonder, do you? I know the numbers don't, like you're talking about Super Bowl numbers.
Yep.
For a preseason World Baseball Classic?
Yeah, but this is for countries in Asia. Like, first off, they're some of the most populated countries in the world.
That is true.
But this is also for them. It's like, because they don't watch the MLB that much. Like for them, this is their guys up against the best.
So isn't that the perfect recipe then for a guy like Manfred rubbing his hands together thinking, this is how you grow the game?
Yeah.
You get 100 million people to watch internationally?
It's not going anywhere. And you want my opinion? So we talked about some of the injuries. And if you're a Mets fan, you're not particularly happy with this tournament.
Could have cost you a World Series.
If you're Jose Altuve, he's going to be out 2 months.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're not happy. He's ultimately kind of the heartbeat of that Astros team. A couple of things that mattered. One, the makeup of Major League Baseball is so different now with the international flavors.
Mm-hmm.
This means a lot to people from Puerto Rico, the Dominican Republic, Mexico, Mexico,
my
Cuba.
parents have a bunch of friends in Cuba, and like it was like appointment viewing.
Big
Right.
thing. And they're always very competitive. The greatest thing that ever happened to the World Baseball Classic, you heard me here, is the United States cares about it, and they lost. So now the conversation shifts to, we don't win a lot of these best-on-best tournaments. Well, we've got a pretty good lineup. There's still some players that probably opted out for financial reasons.
Aaron Judge.
Maybe that becomes a little bit more glaring. And then there's more pressure on the Canadas of the tournament to say, we need our best players here because the prominence has grown. I think the United States cares about this tournament now versus 3 weeks ago when we were talking, it's like, well, maybe it's on, maybe it's not. I think they do care now. I think they lost, so they're going to ramp up even more for 2026 because, you know, they want to defend the honor of the Major League Baseball players. And I think that's the best thing for the tournament.
Yeah.
If the biggest countries and the best countries care, then that just takes the tournament into a whole other stratosphere.
It's an interesting parallel with the World Cup because America, not great at soccer. And they'd love to be better, I'm sure. But like soccer's the one that they just can't break through on.
Mm-hmm.
Baseball, like you just made it to the final. They were never even close to the final in the World Cup this year.
And it's interesting. I can subscribe to your model because in the World Cup, the United States fan base doesn't necessarily care. But it's a global event. It's watched by half the world's population every year.
When they start winning, they start watching. And then they get upset when they don't win at all.
Right.
Which is hilarious
Yeah,
to think
so
about.
I can subscribe to that, you know, if the Americans take it seriously and it's an event that they want to win or compete with, Right. Maybe there is some pressure. Like, we need Judge next time.
Mm-hmm. So that was obviously on the minds of a lot of different people. March Madness, too, was on the minds. And I have a theory. And I'm not the first person to develop this theory. So we talked about this a little bit with Jesse Young. It was going to be an unpredictable tournament. I think we've seen that bore out. We saw one lose to a 16.
Yep.
We saw a 2 lose to a 15. That seems to happen almost every year.
Yes.
The margin for talent is so thin now between mid majors and all this stuff that you're going to see these things all the time. But are upsets actually good? This is my so everyone loves upsets. We love that Purdue lost. We love when Duke loses, except we don't really, because then as the tournament progresses, you end up into these weird matchups that you could have a team lose by 35 in the Elite Eight.
Right.
Because they've, lucked out a couple of times, and I don't want to use lucked out, but you know what I mean? Like, eventually, the better teams do end up winning as you get later on in the tournament.
That's right.
So I always have a theory. Upsets and Cinderella stories are good. You just don't want too many of them. And I'm wondering if we have too many in the tournament.
You don't need it every year. Last year was the St. Peter's Peacocks.
Yeah, the Peacocks, yeah.
You don't need it every year.
Right.
I did, in my bracket, just to be selfish, I did need Kansas to lose as the 1 seed. Wrong 1 seed lost.
I know we don't want to bring your bracket up. I know we don't want to do that.
It's sensitive.
It is sensitive. Having Princeton go through, having FAU go through, yeah, you're right. Like, the last thing you want in Sweet 16s are smashes. 30-point losses. Those are reserved for the opening round. So, and while you can't control it, the one thing I do like is in a tournament where at the end of the week on the Sunday night, on the Sunday night you get the kind of the lay of the land, and then the Monday story, the Tuesday story, the Wednesday story ends up being Princeton. I think it's good in that sense. If Princeton goes out Thursday night and gets walloped, it doesn't matter because you've already created that hype so that now you'll tune in on the Thursday.
One last note on this, because I know we do have to move on.
Yeah.
It's really a debate of whether or not you'd like the upsets early and then not have the close games later, or if you don't want any upsets early but you get close games at the end of the tournament.
Yeah.
It just depends what you prefer.
A couple of bullet points here. Rest in peace, Willis Reed, the captain of the New York Knicks.
Yes. A very iconic New York Knick.
Yeah.
And I think we see Willis coming out. There he comes right now. 6'10" from Grambling. The captain of the Knicks, the most valuable player of the NBA.
Very cool stuff. It's a moment, 1970 final. He misses Game 6, comes back for Game 7. Doesn't play a lot, hits his first 2 shots, and the Knicks go on to win the championship in Game 7 against the LA Lakers, who had Jerry West and Wilt Chamberlain.
Correct.
Cam Newton planning a comeback at quarterback. He says there's no way that there's 32 players better than him at that position right now. All right, Cam. Rafael Nadal out of the top 10 for the first time in tennis since 2005.
I read that, yeah.
You want to talk about a run.
18 years.
Now, it's a little bit arbitrary in that I'm not sure how many people were clocking him being in the top 10 per se, but that level of consistency, especially for a guy who feels like he's battled a lot of injuries, that he doesn't play in as many tournaments as some of the other guys, that was pretty impressive. And, Matt, I'll give you a couple of minutes or seconds to talk about Anderson Silva going into the UFC Hall of Fame.
Maybe other than Barry Bonds, the most overdue Hall of Fame inclusion of all time. Anderson's 16-fight win streak in the UFC, longest in history. And, like, it was at a point where you just knew the guy wasn't going to lose. Like, he's dummying guys that are world-class.
Pretty good stuff. It is time for our random topic that is not about sports. You guys can pick the 3 choices: business ethics, 14th century philosophy, or Doug Ford haircuts.
I know which one probably has the hottest audio.
Yeah, I'm gonna go haircuts.
Let's listen to Doug regale us with his haircut story.
See, he got it. See, every guy out there understands this. So you go into the barber, and I went down south for a few days, so I go into Walmart. I'm a cheap son of a gun, so I see the $15 haircut or whatever. I walk in there, and I said, I just want to trim, just a little trim. And every guy knows what number they are. Number 1, the lower you get, the more they take off their hair. So I'm about a number 4. It's just, a little bit of a trim. So I sit down in the chair. This guy grabs my hair like this and starts shaking. I'm thinking, the problem was, Colin, he didn't speak English and I didn't speak Spanish. So all of a sudden he pulls out the shaver and zoom right across the thing. He must have used not even a 1, a 0. And I said, Senor, look what you did. One side's full, one side's not. So then I had to get the other side done, and needless to say, it cost me $26. I've never paid $26 for a haircut in my life, and I had to give the guy a $10 haircut. But anyway, he went right down to the concrete, as you can see there.
Right down to the concrete, Doug Ford.
Complaining about $26 for a haircut.
Okay.
I feel like I'm paying $35 every time.
Can you set the stage for me here? Like,
Yeah.
He's speaking. Is that Colin DeMello, like CTV News? Is that who asked him the
I
question?
think so.
Okay. So he's at like a press junket for something else, and DeMello asks him, probably got some inside heat on, like, Doug, what happened? You got your ears lowered. Where did is he in Texas?
Florida.
Okay, so he's in Florida. He doesn't have, so he's a cheap son of a gun, $15 American. He's at a Walmart. Like, it is the most Doug Ford thing ever, really. Like, it doesn't surprise me. Fair or foul on that, like for an old clip. Like, fair or
Here's
foul
the
on
thing.
Dougie telling the story here.
I think that he actually looks pretty good with the haircut. It wasn't like an
Oh,
abomination.
sure.
And two, I mean, I know I can speak like this because, my wife's first language is Spanish. I'm not sure how much Spanish you actually need when you're getting your haircut if you just go like,
Yeah.
I want
right.
a number 4.
Yeah. Like, did you not
Uno,
watch...
dos, tres, cuatro.
I was going to say, did you not watch Sesame Street when you were a kid? Like, we can all count Spanish to 10.
That's what I had Dora for.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, it is the most Doug Ford thing that I think I've ever heard. I don't mind him telling the story. It kind of humanizes him a bit,
Yeah, sure.
like swallowing a bee. Like,
I don't understand the $26 and I had to give him a $10 haircut. Like, I don't
I
understand
think he
that
meant
part.
tip.
Yeah.
I think he meant tip.
Yeah.
Yeah. So $36 US.
Let's flash a still up of Doug
Yeah,
Ford.
Dougie,
haircut.
take a look at that.
Oh, yeah, that cut's a little short. But, I mean, I think it looks pretty good.
It's not too bad. Not too bad at all. So that is how we do the topic that is not about sports.
Right.
Doug Ford haircuts this week. It is time for the Mono Mono Challenge. Every week we pick a category and then we see who can name the most of. And I led this off at the beginning of the show saying that we are talking about Peterborough Petes players who got at least 100 points in a season. 18. I think I said somewhere around 25, so it's
18?
actually less.
Yeah, this is going to be
18.
bad.
Okay.
This might be a 3 and out. Like, this is not good.
I will defer the kickoff. You go ahead.
Steve Yzerman. Like, come on.
Okay.
He's maybe the best player to ever come out of Peterborough.
Uh-oh.
91 was his top one.
Uh-oh. Let's start conservative. Mike Ricci.
Correct. On 2 separate occasions.
Man.
I'll go for the 70s and 80s, guys. I'll leave you the 90s.
There's none from the 2000s.
There's maybe one.
No.
No, because, okay, I'll tell you right now.
Beats.
Eric Stahl was very close one year. He got 90-something.
98.
Yeah.
I was gonna
Don't
guess-
say his
I
brother
was-
either, because Jordan was way worse.
Oh my god.
Like
so
60s.
90s Pete's. Luke Richardson. Defenseman Luke Richardson.
Stay-at-home defenseman.
The second overall pick, mind you.
Do you need me to, like, put 2 in for every one of Matthews? Okay. Mike Ricci. Jason Daw.
Jason Daw.
Buffalo Sabres draft pick.
Yes.
Future Montreal Canadian.
108.
Luke Richardson had a 45-point season for the Beats.
That's pretty good. Do you want me to go with another one? Or do you want me to give you a hint on one?
Give me the first letter of the last name of one of them.
I'm going to give you, there's a guy that currently works for Freedom 55
Oh.
in Peterborough. Don't say the wrong guy. This guy used to play with Mario Lemieux. He's on the list.
Used to come into the studio all the time.
Yeah. Oh, and it's escaping me now.
Peterborough Ice Cats.
Yes. DR is the initials. DR.
Oh, no. I know him. That's the worst part.
In 3, 2.
This is so bad.
The gentleman's name is Dave Roach.
Dave
Roach.
I've interviewed him multiple times. I'm very sorry, Dave.
I'll go How about Cameron Mann?
Yes, Cameron Mann did it.
Chris Pronger.
Do you have any
defenseman?
Do you have any more defensemen?
I don't know anybody else.
Do you want to try like Todd Boysoon? They want to go for the goaltenders?
Never heard of that name.
Okay.
You know, there was one defenseman who did do it. Mark, I'd be shocked if you knew the answer.
Oh.
Pronger had 77 points. That's not that
Okay,
far off.
I've got other guys here that I want to run through. Tim Trimper.
Yes.
Trimper's got a 60 goals campaign. Andre Lacroix. He's also got a 60, I think. Andre Lacroix. He would have done it in the early 70s if he did it.
I don't have him on here.
Ah.
What was the other guy's name? Tim?
Tim Trimper.
No.
Tim Trimper never did.
No.
He got like 63 goals.
You're bad
Doesn't
at
matter.
this.
Holy smokes. Mike Harding.
Yeah, he has the record 136.
Right. Nick Robertson.
No.
Absolutely he did.
No chance. He had 55 goals.
Nick Robertson got 100 points one year.
Nick
Who played
Robertson
with-
got 86 points.
I'm gonna-
55 goals, 31. Playoffs don't count.
He would have done it.
It was a shortened year.
Yeah, so that counts.
By the way, the defenseman's name was Sean Evans. 83-84, 109 points.
Oh, wow. Pete Dalliday at home is probably just having a field day on
Yeah.
this one.
Pete, yeah. He's already named him. He's already gone to bed.
Crushing them.
Mark Teven, Scott Tottle,
Oh, yeah, Scotty
Doug
Tuttle.
Evans,
Doug, sure.
Steve Sagan, Randy Burridge.
Randy Burridge.
Yeah, Burridge. Scott McClellan. How about Bob Airy, right on the nose for 100?
Fun Randy Burridge story quickly. That guy had when I was a kid, I had a chance to meet him, and I wasn't very old. I was like 7 because he got drafted in like 86, I think. That guy had tree trunks for like his. It was the biggest legs I'd ever seen on a human being. Randy Burridge.
Well, this has been a fun show, gentlemen. Outstanding stuff as always. You have been.
Worst trivia segment we've done yet.
That was tough.
I wanted you to pull out like Andrew Werner,
I was getting close.
Ronnie
Matt,
Tugnut.
Let's just guess defenseman.
Nick Ritchie was my next guess.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
39 goals, but I don't think he had a lot of points.
No.
This has been the Capital PTBO Sports Show and MNC Podcast production. As always, you can follow us on Twitter as well at MNC Podcasts. For Mark Million, Producer Matty up in the box, I'm Jordan Mercier. We will talk again next week.